Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense. Talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island. Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend and esteemed Jesse Garcia. Jesse is the vice chair of the state party, as well as the county chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. So, Jesse, it's President's Day, President's Week. I wanted to get your thoughts on two great presidents. One was George Washington, the other was Abraham Lincoln. And I wanted to get your thoughts on what did they accomplish, what made them great, and what lessons can we learn from them? So,
from my perspective, Your Honor, and it's a pleasure to be here of our listeners, these two great presidents, one's a founder of our great nation and someone who came out of a very, pristine and wonderful life that he had, a private life that he had, but heard the call of duty and ran to that call and led. President Washington is our first president, one of our founding fathers, and it was through his great acts. And it's unfortunate that in two great moments in our country's history, were precipitated by war. First, a Revolutionary War, and how, despite all of the odds and going up against an empire, the first and biggest global empire in the British Empire, it was a bunch of colonies and individuals that came together as freedom fighters to defend their country and establish the United States of America. I think it was selfless in the same way in that he self-term limited. He said, in the great minds of the founding fathers, George Washington said, we should serve, answer the call of duty, and then go back to our respective homes and communities and states and build America there as private citizens. And he was the first president that, he set 2 terms, 4-year terms as his limit. And then, of course, President Lincoln. President Lincoln, principled, steadfast, a uniter, not a divider. He saw the importance of bringing our country together racially and bringing our country together from regions and making us one country, not two distinct, one country under 2 distinct operations and thought process. From that Civil War that he tried to avoid but needed to go through, I think his greatest accomplishment was keeping this country together and then uniting this country following the Civil War, making sure that we stayed as one country and not splintered off. He was able to do that, or lay the groundwork to do that, because he was taking from us far too soon after that moment. These 2 men helped found the country and help stabilize this country and truly unite this country in a way that we've never seen before. They were selfless. They had a sense of duty. It was not about them. It was about the country, and it was about her people. And I think that's why it's wonderful and appropriate that we honor these 2 great presidents and all those that followed in their stead under the same thought process and the same performance they did, that they put the country ahead of their own political advancements. And so, this country needs more Washingtons and Lincolns, especially now. And, we'll get into America and at a crossroads in a few minutes. But early on, if you ask me about these 2 presidents and what they mean to this country and what they mean to me every day, I would not be here. My father would not have been able to defect here from Cuba, a communist country, if not for what these 2 presidents had done, what this country stands for, and the foundation they laid, both at the beginning of this country, of this great nation, and then following its greatest war, and probably the greatest threat it has had in the years since our being. So those are my thoughts on President's Day.
Well, very well said, Jesse. Let me tell you my thoughts. Washington was a very interesting person because he was a natural leader. He was charismatic in his way. People turned to him for leadership. He was a military man. That's why he was General Washington. But for his great victories under very adverse circumstances, they never would have won the war against England. And you cannot forget the fact that it wasn't a guarantee against the greatest empire at the time, England, that these diverse colonies, these 13 colonies, could wage a war of independence and actually win it. And that's very, very important to understand. You know, we take for granted that we won. It wasn't so sure. There were a lot of very difficult times in the early days. People did not know what was going on, whether they should stay loyal to the crown or fight for independence. There was a division in the country, but Washington was a leader who took the helm of the military, and the military stayed in place. The Continental Army stayed in place and gained great victories, which allowed for the forming of this country. The second thing you can say about Washington is he's not a man who wanted governmental office. He's not a man who chose to be our first president. He wasn't politically ambitious. What he was as a man who wanted to serve and protect and defend this new young nation. When the Articles of Confederation, which is our first governing document, failed because there was no national unity and you had a bunch of states each going off in their own direction, and that was the failure of the Articles of Confederation. You had no national unity. You really didn't have much of a national government. The Articles of Confederation government, if it had not been replaced, you never would have had a United States of America. And what was it replaced by? It was replaced by the Constitution of the United States, which made us a unified federal system. And it came out of the meetings in Philadelphia, the so-called Constitutional Convention. And Washington was the glue that kept the Constitutional Convention going. You had a lot of great minds working there. You had Madison, you had Monroe, you had Hamilton, you had Adams, but the glue that kept all these diverse interests, all these different sovereign individual states together, working in Philadelphia to make this document called the Constitution of the United States, which still exists, and is still the greatest constitution ever written in the history of the world. And it was a brilliant document created by geniuses in their time. But this never would have happened but for George Washington being the leader of the Constitutional Convention. So those two things made him great. And what can we learn from them? As you correctly pointed out, political leaders, elected leaders, should serve and then go home. This is not a lifetime sinecure. You don't have a right to stay there forever. Jefferson said, you go back, you do your service, and you go back to your farm. Well, we don't go back to the farms anymore, but people should go back to their private lives, because by being a contributor to private life, you broaden your experience, and you don't have a monopoly of power by a professional political office-holding class. I think that was a great lesson. The other thing he warned about, Jesse, and it's very relevant to what we're talking about today, is he warned about the danger of factions. By factions, he meant political parties, people who are more concerned about winning for their political group than they were for the love of this country and for a united country. So that was my reflections on Washington. On Lincoln. In the 1840s, and don't hold me to this because I haven't looked it up for a while, but somewhere between, I guess, 1842 and 1846, Lincoln gave a speech before the Women's Temperance Society of Illinois. And it was called the Lyceum speech because it was given in an auditorium, a theater called the Lyceum. And this is what he said. He said, the danger to this country is that some kind of, and he called him a Caesar, some kind of Caesar is going to want to destroy this great constitutional republic created by the founding fathers because they want glory for themselves, they want power for themselves. And there's going to come a time that there's going to be a fight to preserve the unity and the national interest and the national government and this country. He foresaw that as a danger. And he realized, and this was his opportunity, he realized that the person who would save this great republic would be as important as the people, the founding fathers who established it. And so the great contribution of Abraham Lincoln is he foresaw the dangers and he rallied to take the position that he did to save the sacred union. And what can we learn? We learn from him that he was self-sacrificing. He went through great emotional hardship. There's a great anecdote about Lincoln during the Civil War. He was pacing up and down the floors of the White House, and he walked into somebody who was in the telegraph room, a soldier in the telegraph room, and he started chatting with the soldier, and the soldier said to him, he says, "Mr. Lincoln," he said, "I notice that in your remarks you sometimes make jokes." He said, "May I ask you, Mr. President, why do you make jokes?" And Lincoln, because these are such dangerous and serious times, and Lincoln put his arm around the young man. He said, My American hero, let me tell you, these are sad times. And if I did not laugh, I would cry. So the laughter and the humor is what gets me through these terrible moments when I see the reports and seeing our young people dying in battle. And I think the lesson we can learn is that no great republic, no free country can survive without sacrifice. That's the lesson that we learned from Washington. That's the lesson we learned from Lincoln. And by the way, that's the lesson that you speak to every week, Jesse, on this show, that don't take the great freedoms we have in this country for granted, that we have to make the sacrifices necessary to preserve and defend this great country. Moving on, Jesse, America at the crossroads. So these are the questions I want to ask you. Can this country now regain national unity? And can we regain true leadership of the Western world? What do you say?
Even in our darkest times, and we just spoke about two dark times, one specifically, the Civil War. But if you go through the annals of American history, we've seen periods of times where this country has been divided. There's been angst. We start the Civil War that ripped this country apart. We've seen recessions that led to battles and class warfare and such. And that took some time. And then, of course, the civil rights movement that came forward in the 1960s, late 50s and 60s into the 70s. The one thing that of all those, and at that point, it was the worst divisions that we would see in our history, and especially at those times. Yet this country came together. Dare I say there was a little bit of division during the 2000 election when it went to the Supreme Court. And it was a series of hundreds of votes that determined who the president was. And the Democrats at that point were starting to question the legitimacy ironically, they're the ones that question the legitimacy of campaigns and elections and results and the presidency. But even then, it was a national tragedy of 9/11 that brought us together. This country, not because of its politicians, but because of its people, its principles, and the fact that we have these liberties and these freedoms, it is the people that bring this country together. They see, no matter what era or what time of period it is in our nation's history, they see the divisiveness, and sometimes it takes a long time. Wars were years. The recessions were years. The civil rights battles were years. We were leading up to 9/11. Took years, but we came together. This country has a resiliency and almost an innate. It's in its DNA. We will unite, and unfortunately, at times we have to unite around politicians that would rather see us divided than bring us together. And unfortunately, we live right now in the times, and we're being challenged abroad and within. It's something that President Lincoln, warned us about the threat from within and what will take us down as a country. But I do believe that this country will rally. It will unite again. And something will challenge us in decades from now, hopefully, or if not, in the next century will challenge us again. But it's the resiliency of the American people that will keep us united. We may have to go through it a little bit differently because of social media and all these keyboard warriors and all our threats that we allow from abroad, whether it be cybersecurity or these bots from Russia, and China and such. But the American people have it. And I think that one of the best things that I've seen is that You've seen it. I think we need to stop classifying ourselves as different types of peoples and of Americans. I forget. I can never say the name of the actor properly. Erebus. He's an actor. He's done a number of different acting. He's being thought of as possibly the next James Bond. And just recently, he took backlash because he said to him, he's not going to refer to himself as a black actor anymore. He's going to refer to himself as an actor. Morgan Freeman talked about the importance of let's not having, we're all one people. We don't need to classify ourselves as me being a Hispanic, the first Hispanic chairman of the Suffolk County Republican Committee. I'm the chairman of the Suffolk County Republican Committee, because by doing that, we're not separating. We are all one people, and we prevent those people on social media. We prevent the media. We prevent those very bad, woke, progressive politicians, and those on the far right too, from separating us. The people in the industry are actors. The people who are lead political parties or businesses are not the first ones. I think it was wonderful that we had 2 black quarterbacks in the Super Bowl this past year. But from my perspective, as a Hispanic American, I don't look at race. Those are 2 outstanding young men who have far more talent than any of us, and have a talent to entertain us in some way. And they show the grit of America, and then it's American people and it's American ideals. I think that once we start dropping labels, and we're just, we're just actors, or we're just CEOs, or we're just the blue collar worker, or we're the white collar worker. We're just people. We're just Americans doing our best to achieve our portion of the American dream. Because once we put labels on it, the way they use them, they create decisiveness. We're all one people. And that's where I do think that if we can do something, we can do it in a very positive manner. But that requires all of us. Because, kids aren't born, not liking other kids for a variety of reasons. So that's taught. We need to stop teaching it. And then we need to stop exasperating it and putting it in everyone and exasperating it as we grow into adulthood. We're all one people. We're all Americans. And that's the way we have to look at it. And that's why I believe that despite the challenges we fight now with, self-serving politicians on both sides of the aisle that represent the 2 far factions of the political ideology, we need to make sure that we stay here in the united front, because, united we stand, divided we fall. That is cliche, you may say, but it's reality.
It's a fundamental truth. Kevin has given us the sign. We're going to be taking a break. We've been listening to my good friend, esteemed colleague, Chairman Jesse Garcia, the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. This is the Long Island Report. We'll be taking a short break, and we'll be back with more interesting conversation in just a moment. Stay tuned.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
We're back. This is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. So, Jesse, the second part of that question about America at the crossroads, we talked about regaining national unity, and you gave a comprehensive and eloquent statement of the importance of national unity and your optimistic view and vision that we will regain it when we need it, and the historical moments that we've had challenges and we're going to rise again to be unified. But the big problem now is we live in a very dangerous world. And last week, you and I were talking about the clear and present danger of what's going on in foreign lands. We have this group that you and I have described as the axis of evil, which is China and Russia and Iran. You can throw in Venezuela and North Korea in that group. But the real question becomes, can the United States of America regain true leadership of the Western world? Let me tell you what I think, and I'll get your comments. I think it's now more important than ever that we understand that there are people who would want to take us down. They just don't want to take us down economically, and they don't want to just take us down diplomatically, and they don't want to just take us down in the simplest ways of rivalry between great statehoods. They want to dominate the world. They want to destroy Western civilization. They want to destroy democracy. In fact, they want to destroy freedom. And it's very important, Jesse, that we regain the true leadership of the Western world. Because if we are not the leaders, Western civilization, the Western world, democracies will fail, will fall, and will be overwhelmed by these tyrannies that have no respect for human life, for human dignity, for freedom of opportunity, for freedom of speech, for freedom of association, for freedom of religion, for freedom of thought. These are dangerous tyrannies that have no respect for the individual, have no respect for their rights. It's all about control by the elites in their countries. And so we need to regain true leadership of the Western world. Now, President Trump correctly recognized that NATO's members were not making the contributions they should be making. And sometimes it was mischaracterized that he was against NATO. No, he was saying that if NATO is to survive as a countervailing force against tyrannies and protect the integrity of all the sovereign nations in NATO, that they had to make their contributions too. Their contributions had to be in men and women for the armed forces and for the economic contributions, and they were not paying their fair share. So they mischaracterized what President Trump was doing. There's nothing wrong with reminding people, if you're getting the benefit of American protection, you should make a contribution, because you shouldn't all fall on America and the American people. And it becomes more important than ever, Jesse, because let me tell you the latest. In the Wall Street Journal this week, the lead editorial pointed out that China is now working out a deal with Russia to get more and more weapons and more sophisticated armaments and supplies for the war. Now, we had Gordon Chang, who's a leading expert on China, on the Cats at Night show, and Gordon said it's already been happening. They've just been keeping the lid on it. They haven't been talking about what China's been doing in terms of arming Russia. So I said to him in the show, I said, Gordon, I said, why are they doing that? What's motivating our government for keeping the wraps on the fact that China has been a supply station for Russia in their aggressive, adventurous war against Ukraine? And he said, because they're obsessed with climate change. That people like Kerry, the former Secretary of State, and the climate czar, and a former presidential candidate, the Democrats, he's so obsessed that the most important thing in the world for him is climate change, and everything else takes a second row to that agenda. And they don't want to disturb the relationships. Well, it seems to me Secretary Kerry's got it absolutely wrong. It's nice to worry about climate 1,000 years from now or 500 years from now. It's not going to do us any good if the world's democracies, the freedom lovers of the world, fall under the sway of dictatorships. What say you?
Absolutely. I am flabbergasted, and we shared about it. We saw the same reports. Think about it. Climate change is now dictating national security policies, and that's what the situation is here. That is completely wrong. That would be wrong for an elementary school student that's just learning basic social studies in the classroom. it's unparalleled of how stupid this matter is. And I'm only hoping that it's dumbfounded. I believe that that one of these issues is that you're right. China has been supplying Russia for some time now. This is no secret. It's been discussed. It's been revealed and such. If I'm the Russian people and I'm the Russian government, and Putin is, depending on what reports you read in the mainstream press, and I wonder what the intelligence divisions have about this, he's teetering on support because this war has gone on 11 months too long. It's taken too many hits, both economically, from a military apparatus point of view, and from human life on their end, on every end, but specifically those for the Russians. I'd be worried if we're talking. China's very inching closer that parts of Russia will become colonized by them. They have far more wealth. They have more standing, unfortunately, on the world stage than they do, and their military has been sitting back and rebuilding and progressing without being challenged in any sort. They've not been losing any of their military hardware, and they're watching the Western response during this Ukrainian war. That we know is for sure. Biden needs to reestablish, and we do need the president, no matter where you stand on the political scale, you need to have the president reestablish Americans' prominence on the world stage, both diplomatically, economically, and from a military point of view, a national security point of view. Because, as you pointed out, Trump was right in telling and advising and cajoling and threatening NATO to start paying up, because you could foresee something like this in Ukraine going on, where war was coming to their borders. And they didn't heed it. They were angry with him. But in some cases, some of those countries heeded their call, and they started ramping up their contributions and their own military just as a deterrence, because that's what we need. When you have a bully in the block, it's a deterrence that stops them from moving forward. The absence of leadership, of American leadership, allows other nefarious characters on the world stage to slink into places of influence. That's what's happened with the axis of evil that you've described. It has allowed them to slink into these places using their financial might, using their might with natural resources, and certainly with the rattling of a saber of their military. So I have, for one, and at least encourages an American and someone who wants his son to grow up in this freedom-loving country, that President Biden took the steps to go to Ukraine, Poland, and to reassure the allies of NATO, especially on the Eastern Front, of America's commitment. But the problem is, we've seen too much from Obama to Biden now, and those presidencies. There's a lot of talk, but there's no action. And when there is finally action, it's too late. Like, we should have been arming and assisting the Ukrainian government far earlier, far faster, and far more quickly than we did at the outset of this war.
That's exactly right. Because if we had done that, that would have acted as a deterrent. And then Biden, with his inability to express himself intelligently or articulately, he said at the very beginning, he said, well, if it's only a minor incursion, remember that? Only a minor incursion? That was a green light for the Russians to go in. What do you mean minor incursion? When is that acceptable to invade a sovereign country, a democratically elected country, with a minor incursion? We've learned that lesson from the old days, from the 1930s that led to World War II. You cannot appease adventurous people who want to dominate the world by saying, oh, well, give up the Sudetenland, it's no big deal. What's the problem? Oh, allow Germany to come in and have Anschluss, which means dominating the country of Austria, and then be surprised when the next move was to invade Poland in 1939. The whole thing is ridiculous. Minor incursions are not minor incursions. They're aggression that has to be confronted. And Ronald Reagan understood that the way you deter aggression and stop war is by being well prepared, that the best defense against a war is to be ready for war. Not to go to war, but to be ready for war. And for the enemy to know that if they go to war, they can pay a terrible price. So the answer to the question, if America loses its way, what is the hope for Western civilization? I'll answer it this way, Jesse. Without America, that great shining light on the hill, as Reagan described it, without our Pax Americana, without our wisdom, our economy, our military strength, if we don't take the leadership, Western civilization and the democracies will fail. There's no doubt about it. We have to take the leadership role. And as you correctly point out, China's been watching, and they're looking for an opportunity and for an excuse to go into Taiwan. And what do we do if they go into Taiwan? Because that's the next step. So let me switch gears and let me talk to you, Jesse, about the continuing failures of the Biden administration, which troubles me enormously. And it doesn't get better. I will give President Biden credit for going to the Ukraine and Poland, but I will not give him credit for the following: raging inflation that is not getting better. It's hurting the middle class and the lower classes. The deficits, which causes inflation and jeopardizes our ability to pay our debts. Open borders, which means our country is being overrun by people we don't know who they are. They're cartel people. They're potential terrorists. They've picked up 98 people who are on the terrorist watch list that we know about. Okay, people from all over the world are flowing in here, including Chinese. We have no idea whether their intentions are good or nefarious. Our military is so hung up on being woke and using the right pronouns that they're having trouble recruiting, and they want to allow for cuts in the budget. And as you correctly point out, we should be increasing military spending, not cutting it. That's the last thing we should be cutting. You have this crisis of identity politics, Jesse, and you talked about it very eloquently earlier. This identity politics is the most divisive thing you can imagine. Enough of the identity politics. You're not a Cuban American, you're an American. I am not a Jewish American, I'm an American. And let's put that nonsense behind us. We have to recognize the loss that we've had in respect in foreign affairs and world affairs. And that begins with the Afghanistan withdrawal, a terrible thing which emboldened our adversaries and saw weakness from the United States and this leadership of the Bidens. And we have really failed to appreciate and confront how serious our adversaries are in dominating the world, and that to them, we're an obstacle that has to be taken down before they can get the control and the domination that they want. So what say you, Jesse?
Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry. I agree with everything you said. You said it far eloquently than I could ever, because you pointed out the challenges on a global scale, foreign and domestic, and what we need to do to confront as a united country to do this, because we have to lead. And here's the issue, and I think we've talked about it over some time. This is a two-pronged approach that America needs to take, that the American president needs to take. He needs to address us, shave off the political, progressive talk that has never been part of his vernacular, by the way, until he needed to get through primary elections. We need to get rid of that stuff and focus on what's important. Focus on governing for the greater good of the country. If that means it, if you can't agree with a pipeline, like Biden can't agree with a pipeline that we were dealing with, that instead of shutting that pipeline down, work with others to make sure we can accomplish parts of his goals and parts of the goals of economic security, along with energy independence. It's that type of approach we need. Right now, we don't. We have a leader that's kowtowing to one side of the political spectrum, and a small side at that, and it's leading to the governance of this country, leading to the divisiveness of the country, leading to inflation, leading to the fact that our military is demoralized, leading to the fact that our military needs to be modernized, and it leads to constant defections. Additionally, it reduces the voice of America and the American presence and American presence that we have on the global stage that we need to reestablish so that we can move forward in the best ways possible, both on a global scale, but more importantly, first you got to take care of your home base. You got to take, in any campaign we ever run, we're always taught, take care of your base first. Make sure your base is there, and we can move forward with everything and such. You build from there out. Well, the base is the American people. That's what we need to first address, take care of, and then we can fundamentally move forward concurrently by maintaining a presence and filling the vacuum of lack of leadership on the global stage.
Very well said. Kevin has given us that sign. We're going to be taking a break. This is the Long Island Report with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Stay tuned for more interesting conversation. We'll be back in a moment.
We're shipping Mother's Day gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes. My gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it.
Yes.
Guarantee it.
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product, services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Visit a store today.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Well, Jesse, the last segment we were talking about the failures of the Biden administration, and while we were chatting off radio a few moments ago, I said to you I saw this fantastic column by Andrew McCarthy, the former Assistant U.S. Attorney for Southern District of New York, a political commentator for the National Review and the New York Post, and often seen on Fox News as a commentator. And he raised the following question in his column. He said, should Biden be impeached? Fundamentally, he's saying that the only way that we're going to be able to protect our border, there's no other way to do it, is that Biden has to be impeached. And his view, and let me summarize it for you, Jesse, is not so much that it would be successful. You can get a vote of the House to impeach the president, but you won't get an affirmative vote to convict him and win in the Senate. And what McCarthy is saying, it doesn't matter because you'll finally and ultimately bring to the attention of the American people the disaster that's happening at the border, and this country is being invaded. We're being overrun. We don't have the resources to take care of all these people. We don't know who they are, whether they're criminals, whether they're terrorists, what diseases they're bringing in, and the cost they have in terms of education, hospitals, welfare, housing. These are very, very serious issues. And Andy McCarthy is saying, look, Biden should be impeached for what I've been saying a long time. Biden has failed to fulfill his obligation to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States and this country. Without borders, you do not have a country. The immigration laws are being disregarded. Sanctuary cities are unconstitutional, illegal, and yet nobody says a word. The Democratic mayors have given sanctuary cities status, and people have come in there, and now they're begging for federal money. They're missing the point. It's not about money to support these people. It's about these people should not be in here illegally breaching our borders because it is invasion. If you want to become a citizen, you do it the way our forebears did it. You wait online, you make your application, and then you come in an orderly, legal way. So Andy McCarthy is saying the only way you can get the attention of the American people, the only way you're going to be able to force this issue, and he's not a big supporter of impeachment as a general proposition, but this is what you have to do. And the other night, on Cats at Night, Congressman Peter King, our mutual friend, Peter was saying that he's against impeachments. And I said back to Peter, I said, look, if there was ever a case for impeachment, it wasn't about Clinton having sex with an intern, and it wasn't about Trump making a phone call. If there was ever a case for impeachment, it was the failure of this president to protect and defend our Constitution, our borders, and to enforce the laws. What say you, Jesse?
I kind of agree with our good friend, Peter King, former Congressman King. I believe that, unfortunately, while this may be a tool, a proper use of impeachment, I believe that, unfortunately, in recent times, the Democrats most recently, and I guess the Republicans were wrong in doing this too during the Clinton presidency. We're weaponizing impeachment now, and we're weaponizing it to the point where we're trying to overturn the will of the voters and such. It's not. That's not what impeachment was for. Now, impeachment was maybe, as you laid out, and you laid out that case, and the case was laid out in that editorial that you just spoke about. That may be a reason to use impeachment, but I also always believe that the greatest use of changing over power in our republic is not by the hands of other politicians, but by the hands of the voters. Because we can possibly achieve the same by using the subpoena powers and using the hearings and the committees of the House of Representatives. And if the Republicans held the Senate, we should have been able to do that there as well. There is no doubt that the failed policies of the Biden administration, where it's complete and utter negligence of the American Constitution, of the American people, the American way, the fact that we have no borders because of his policies and his inaction or his actions to appease the left of his party, that is something that would be impeachable. But it's best that we do this through the legislative process, through hearings, through investigations, through shining a light on it, so that the people themselves, when November of 24 comes again, they will remember. They will see that that Joe Biden is not the president that they should have to lead this country for another 4 years. And maybe it's not the Democratic Party that he represented and he led that should be leading this country for another 4 years. The Republican Party is a party of ideas. We're a party of action. We're a party of executing a strategy for the taxpayers, the small businesses, the farmers, building up our military to defend ourselves. We support cops. We support frontline workers and first responders. Certainly, we want parents to be involved in our teachers. We do that through policy and by shining a light through legislation, and sometimes going to the chamber and in the well of the chamber, in the House of Representatives or in the Senate, and screaming our minds off on a well thought out policy so that we get the attention of the American people. That's what I believe that we should do, because once it's properly and in an articulate fashion demonstrated to the American people, we don't need tools like impeachment. We may need to use tools of impeachment on secretaries like the Homeland Security Secretary, Mayorkas. But I think we need to put this power back into the hands of the voters so that they can peacefully change our government.
Well, I have to say, Jesse, you and Congressman King have laid out the best possible answer to the frustration that people have about the open borders and what's happening to our country, this invasion of our country through the legislative process. And I respect both you, as Mr. Chairman, and Congressman King for your thoughts. But what Andy McCarthy is saying is nothing else has worked, and we got to do something to focus the attention. And I'm not saying it's a perfect answer, and I know what the dangers are, and the Republicans can be accused of weaponization of the impeachment process. I get that. I really do. I'm deeply troubled that we even have to have this conversation. And I know Andy McCarthy, very thoughtful gentleman, a great lawyer, a great analyst of politics and government. He understands it too. Fundamentally, it really is, in his mind, a last resort because nothing else seems to be working. But maybe you're right. Maybe the first thing to do is start having hearings on this, having to do with funding. And maybe the answer is you start off by impeaching Mayorkas. You wouldn't have an objection to impeaching the Homeland Secretary, would you?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Okay. Kevin, how are we doing on time? We have 2 minutes in this segment. Well, I want to run this one by you. I want to talk to you about another failure of leadership in this country, and it's really a disaster. And I'm talking about the Ohio train wreck disaster. The people can't drink the water. They can't shower. They can't brush their teeth. They can't breathe the air. They can't live peacefully anymore. They're under threat because of that train wreck disaster. And to say that this administration is too little, too late, and Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, the young man who would be president, has acted totally irresponsibly and saying it's somebody else's fault. First, it wasn't my job, he said. It was all the other agencies involved. It's not my job. Then he said, well, the reason we had the disaster, the train wreck in the first place, is because it's Trump's fault and his administration. What do you say about that, Jesse?
I just think it's unbelievable, completely unbelievable. They blame the past administration when it's their policies that have hurt this. How do we not alert the governor and the state that hazardous materials are going to be transported through their state on rail? It's policy that they should be doing that. And what about FEMA? You know, they want to point at all this checkerboard type of bureaucracy that's helping them out, instead of focusing this under one strategic command to help these people. It almost seems like there's a conspiracy going on, that something transpired, and this is what feeds conspiracy theorists. Something went on, something was on that train, or something is going wrong that the mass media is not reporting this on a daily basis. I mean, this is a tragic situation affecting tens of thousands of people and families. This is not being reported. It's being led by not one centralized command, by a patchwork of different agencies. And the support is not being given there to the people of Ohio or the governor. In fact, the governor is being kept out of the loop here. This is just completely wrong, and it demonstrates the negligence and the ineptness of the Biden administration. They just can't even get a response to a train wreck done right.
Well, Jesse, I have to tell you, and the problem is I was a very poor science student, but I know enough about science to know that the way the wind blows, literally and figuratively, it's not. Some of that bad air has been flowing into the state of Pennsylvania. So it's not just the Republican governor of Ohio's problem; it's a Democrat governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro's problem, because his people are being poisoned by this bad air. And I'll tell you this, Jesse, and this is what troubles me deeply from the so-called scientific or medical community. I am not reassured when they say everything is fine. You can drink the water, you can brush your teeth, you can shower in it, you can breathe the air. Everything is just swell. We heard all those stories after 9/11. Everything was just swell, and thousands of people have gotten ill, sick, and died because of the exposure to toxic chemicals. The toxic chemicals that were at least on one carload were the same toxic chemicals that they made chemical weapons during World War I to poison their enemies. And that's in the atmosphere there. So don't tell me everything is fine, it's going to go away, don't make a big deal of it. They're on top of their game. This administration has totally failed. You're absolutely right. There should have been immediate FEMA there. They should have mobilized the armed forces to start dealing with that. They should have been bringing in gas masks. They should have done evacuations. They should have been bringing in fresh water. They should have been doing testing. They should have gotten people out of there as quickly as they could until they could really make sure that it was safe. And by the way, 9/11 showed one thing, that impact on the environment lasted for years. And we now know the soil is contaminated, and we know the waters, the rivers and the lakes and the streams there are contaminated as well. This is serious business, and this administration has failed dismally. And for Buttigieg to posture, he knows what he's doing, saying he's going there on Thursday of this week is an absolute joke. This is a couple of weeks old. He should have been there immediately, taking charge. If not him, then Biden should have had the FEMA people there immediately. Let's take a break. Kevin has given us that sign. It is the Long Island Report with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be back in a minute for our final segment of this week's Long Island Report.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for a Light and Fit remix. Like a crunchy storm of graham cookies, caramel pearls, and dark chocolate, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Light and Fit remix varieties with craveable flavors and up to 120 calories and 10 grams of protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See remixyogurt.com.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. This is our last segment of this week's show. So during the break, I said to Jesse, I want to touch about what everybody calls the third rail of American politics. That is the funding of Social Security, the funding of Medicare, and will there be money available to pay the future obligations? Right now, the reports seem to be that sometime between 2034 and 2036, we're going to have problems getting the money for both of those programs. Now, you can say, well, that's forever. It's a long time from now. But the question becomes, what should we be doing to deal with that issue? Let me tell you, I understand that this is one of the most dangerous political conversations one can have, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. And Social Security and Medicare, in fact, is both a moral, legal, and economic obligation of the government to its citizenry who pay into these programs. There's no doubt about it, Jesse. These programs have to be saved. You and I agree these programs have to be saved. So I'm not saying get rid of these programs. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be adjustments in it. But I think since we have a moral obligation, an economic obligation, a legal obligation to our citizenry, and you have a financial reality check of running out of money in 2034 or to 2036 for both these essential programs, let me share my thoughts. I think it can be saved, and I would propose a couple of possibilities that would help. Number one, I think all monies that are taken from you, from me, everybody else who's working and paying into the Medicare, because you get taxed every time you have a check for Social Security and for Medicare. And they say it's not a tax, it's a contribution, but fundamentally it's a tax. But the point is it's a moral obligation, it's a legal obligation to give me my check every month for Social Security. It's an obligation if I submit for Medicare to help me pay my medical bills. It is an obligation. So how do you save it? You should have a designated, as Al Gore called it, a lockbox once upon a time back in 2000 in the presidential elections. All that money that comes out of all the working people should be in a designated fund, should not be touched by any other governmental program. That's one way of saving it. So you just don't say, well, we're out of money, and just to take it out of general federal funds. The money is there because it's there. It's locked away for those purposes and those purposes only. That's number one. Number two, there's no reason people should be able to take, unless there's a compelling reason for them, a medical reason for them, for people to be taking money for Social Security in their early 60s. Extend these by a number of years that you have to keep working before you draw down those funds to delay the taking of those monies. So those are my quick and easy solutions. Not so easy, I gather. But what do you say about that, Jesse?
Well, first I want to begin by stating that, let me make it clear to the American people and the people of Long Island. The Republican House majority does not in any way want to, or will they, cut Social Security benefits or Medicaid benefits or Medicare benefits. That is a lie, a narrative that Democrats, it's their go-to lines that they go to attack budgetary and fiscal policies put forth by the Republicans to try to distract the voters. They use racism and they use the attack on Social Security.
I agree with both those
Medicaid.
points. I agree with you.
So let me just say that first and foremost. I completely agree with you with the lockbox. I think the lockbox is something that has bipartisan support. And more importantly, it's a first good start because our investments, our personal investments in Social Securities are going to be locked away. And why do we need that? Why? Because for decades, under Democratic control, the House of Representatives would use a Social Security fund as a piggy bank to advance and pay for their ill-fated, ill-advised programs. They're basically a free lunch programs they would give, not free lunch, everything is free for people, and the government pays for it. It's their way of creating, early on, from the 70s into the 80s, the nanny state that they want to create here in America, where the people are subservient and dependent upon the government for their fortune and their prosperity. That needs to end. We need to take a strong bipartisan look of protecting the Social Security contributions that this country makes. And the best way to do this, and maybe one of the best ways to save these programs and bring more revenue into these programs, is by creating more real jobs, good paying jobs, by maybe, the pipeline in the middle of America that was stopped, that cost thousands of jobs. These woke programs that the Democrats keep pushing forward that are job killers, climate control that has no science behind it. Maybe if they stop going after industries and over-regulating that stifles the ability for the economy to grow good paying jobs, then we'll have a larger pool of people to contribute and save a program that is a commitment between government and worker here in the United States.
Jesse, can I tell you something? I thought I was being smart and clever by talking about the lockbox and pushing back the age to take money for full retirement and for full benefits and Social Security. I think those are both good ideas. And if I could reach that far back, I'd pat myself on the back for those two ideas. And I will also tell you that neither one of those ideas is unique or special to me. Other people with better minds on these financial public policy issues have said that, but I think they both make sense. But you're absolutely right. The more people you have working, the more people you have contributing, the more productivity you have. It's fine. What's sad about what's going on in America today is that the percentage of people who are actually working today is diminishing year by year by year. In other words, people out there, instead of having 70% of the population working and then contributing to Social Security or Medicare, that number keeps going down and down and down. So the real working population who are contributing has gone down, and that's a risk. And you're right. You have full employment as long as you can, and productivity will pay for this. And when you have and the other thing is, when you have good productivity, there are more things that are coming in terms of revenues from different streams. More jobs are created, more economic viability, the debt is managed better, and you won't have these shortfalls of government revenues, Jesse.
That's why the Democrats need to change their point. They have to change their policy and their desire to create a nanny state, to create a socialistic state here in the United States of America. Because the more people you empower to grow jobs, grow small businesses, they will provide the revenues that takes care of the kids and our students, the students in our classrooms, that will take care of the cops, take care of the firefighters, take care of our military, take care of those individual civil servants that need to be in place to provide services by the government, services that are basic services here in locally and throughout the country. That's how we do it, by sparking the entrepreneurial spirit of the American middle class and the American taxpayer, so that we could fill our coffers with enough revenue that meets the commitment that we made as a country with the people who have made these contributions through Social Security and such.
Jesse, Kevin's giving me the sign. We have to sign off. But I think you and I, in this last segment, have solved this problem. Now, all they have to do is listen to Garcia and Weinberg, and this Social Security Medicare problem is now solved. We should get the congressional.
We'll get there.
We should get the Congressional Medal of Honor for bravery for taking on the third rail of American politics and solving it, Jesse. So this is a joint venture between the chairman of the Republican Party and the Democratic retired justice of the State Supreme Court. We have solved the Medicare Social Security problem. Let the word go forth. This has been the Long Island Report with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, Judge Richard Weinberg. We have solved many problems today. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation, and we look forward to being with you next week. May your families be safe and well. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.